Chapter 1. The Midnight Express. The platform of Gare de Lyon buzzed with the restless energy of departure, a symphony of steam and farewells under the iron lattice of the station's grand roof. Hercule Poirot, immaculate in his tailored overcoat and polished shoes, stood apart from the crowd, his sharp eyes scanning the scene. His moustache, waxed to perfection, twitched slightly as he noted the hurried porter, the tearful au revoirs, and the gleaming silhouette of the Orient Star, the overnight express bound for Istanbul. It was a train of legend, its mahogany-paneled cars promising luxury and secrets in equal measure. Poirot, ever the observer of human nature, sensed the undercurrent of tension beneath the polished veneer. He adjusted his hat and handed his ticket to the conductor, a wiry man with a pinched face and darting eyes. "Monsieur Poirot, welcome aboard," the conductor said, his voice clipped but courteous. "Your compartment is in carriage B, number 7. A most comfortable berth." Poirot nodded, his gaze lingering on the conductor's nervous fingers which fumbled briefly with the ticket stub. A small detail, perhaps, but Poirot's little grey cells were already at work. The interior of the Orient Star was a marvel of opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over plush velvet seats, and the scent of polished wood mingled with the faint perfume of jasmine from a nearby passenger. Poirot made his way to the dining car, where early arrivals sipped champagne and exchanged polite smiles. He chose a corner table, positioning himself to observe the room. A waiter, crisp in his white jacket, offered a menu, but Poirot waved it away. "A tisane, s'il vous plaît," he said, his voice precise. Food could wait, observation could not. The passengers were a tapestry of wealth and mystery. At a nearby table sat Madame Eleanor Duval, a young heiress whose diamond earrings caught the light with every nervous tilt of her head. Her laughter was too bright, her glances too frequent toward the door. Across from her, Colonel Victor Rostov, a Russian diplomat with a brusque manner, sipped his vodka with the air of a man expecting trouble. A quiet scholar, Dr. Elias Moreau, sat alone, scribbling in a leather-bound notebook, his spectacles glinting as he paused to stare into the distance. And then there was Signora Lucia Bellini, an Italian opera singer, her scarlet shawl draped dramatically over her shoulders as she regaled a young couple with tales of La Scala. Poirot's attention was drawn to a brief exchange at the far end of the car. A man in a grey suit, his face shadowed by a fedora, leaned close to a woman in a fur-trimmed coat. Their words were inaudible, but the urgency was unmistakable. Between the 5th and 6th bells, the man hissed, his voice low but carrying just enough for Poirot's sharp ears. The woman nodded, her gloved hand tightening on her purse. They parted quickly, the man disappearing toward the sleeping cars, the woman adjusting her veil and joining Madame Duval's table. Poirot's moustache twitched again. Bells, a deadline perhaps, or a signal. He filed the phrase away, a puzzle piece yet to find its place. The train lurched forward, its whistle piercing the Parisian night. The rhythm of the wheels settled into a steady cadence, and the dining car filled with the clink of glasses and the murmur of conversation. Poirot sipped his tisane, its warmth soothing as he catalogued the passengers' faces. There was something amiss, a discord in the harmony of the scene. He could not yet name it, but his instincts, honed by years of unraveling human deceit, were rarely wrong. As the waiter cleared a table, Poirot noticed a small object on the floor, a single glove, black leather, its stitching frayed. He beckoned the waiter over. "Monsieur, this glove, does it belong to anyone here?" The waiter shrugged, his expression indifferent. "Non, monsieur. Perhaps it was left behind." Poirot retrieved the glove, turning it over in his hands. It was small, likely a woman's, and bore a faint monogram, L.B. Lucia Bellini, or another. He slipped it into his pocket, resolving to inquire later. A glove, he knew, could be as telling as a fingerprint. The conductor passed through the car, announcing the first call for dinner. Poirot watched him closely, noting the slight tremor in his hands as he checked his pocket watch. "We keep precise time on the Orient Star," the conductor said to a passenger, his smile forced. "The bells mark each hour, even through the night." Poirot's interest sharpened. Bells again. Were they merely the train's timekeepers, or something more? As the dining car emptied, Poirot lingered, his mind turning over the evening's observations, Madame Duval's nervous glances, Colonel Rostov's curt responses, Dr. Moreau's cryptic notes, and the whispered talk of bells. All were threads in a tapestry yet to be woven. He rose, adjusting his tie, and made his way to his compartment. Carriage B, number 7, was as luxurious as promised, a narrow bed with crisp linens, a polished writing desk, and a window framing the fleeting lights of the countryside. Before retiring, Poirot inspected his surroundings. The compartment was immaculate, save for a single anomaly, a folded timetable tucked beneath the pillow, its edges worn as if frequently handled. He opened it, expecting the standard Orient Star schedule, but found instead a handwritten note scrawled in the margin. 5th to 6th, do not delay. The ink was fresh, the handwriting hurried. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A coincidence? None. Hercule Poirot did not believe in coincidences. He locked the compartment door and settled into his chair, the timetable in hand. The train's rhythm was a metronome for his thoughts, each click of the wheels urging his mind to work faster. The glove, the whispered words, the note, all were clues, small but significant. Someone on this train was planning something, and Poirot suspected it was no mere indiscretion. Murder, perhaps. The word hung in his mind, heavy but not yet certain. As the first bell of the night rang out, signaling 1 o'clock, Poirot extinguished his lamp and lay in the darkness, listening to the train's heartbeat. The Orient Star was more than a journey. It was a stage, and its players were already in motion. Between the 5th and 6th bells, something would happen. Hercule Poirot would be ready. Chapter 2. The 5th bell sounds. The Orient Star carved its way through the alpine night, its wheels a relentless pulse against the snow-dusted tracks. Hercule Poirot, seated in his compartment, studied the handwritten timetable note from the previous evening. 5th to 6th, do not delay. The words, scrawled in hasty ink, seemed to pulse with intent. He folded the paper carefully, slipping it into his pocket beside the black leather glove. The train's rhythm was soothing, yet Poirot's mind was anything but calm. His little grey cells churned, sensing the prelude to a crime. At precisely 5 o'clock, as the train wound through a narrow pass, the 5th bell rang, a clear, resonant chime that echoed through the carriages. Poirot paused, his pen hovering over his notebook, where he had begun sketching a list of passengers. Madame Eleanor Duval, Colonel Victor Rostov, Dr. Elias Moreau, Signora Lucia Bellini, and the mysterious pair from the dining car. The bell's sound was crisp, official, yet it carried an undercurrent of warning. Poirot rose, adjusted his tie, and stepped into the corridor, determined to observe the train's pulse at this critical hour. The corridor of carriage B was dimly lit, the sconces casting long shadows on the polished wood. Poirot moved silently, his polished shoes making no sound on the thick carpet. He passed Madame Duval's compartment, number 5, and noted a faint light beneath her door, a rustle of fabric. Perhaps a dress, suggested movement within. Next was Colonel Rostov's compartment, number 8, where a low muttering in Russian carried through the thin walls. Poirot's lips pursed. The colonel's brusqueness in the dining car had not escaped him, nor had his habit of checking his pocket watch with military precision. As Poirot reached the end of the carriage, a sharp scream pierced the air, abrupt and chilling. It came from the direction of carriage C, the next car forward. He quickened his pace, his cane tapping lightly, and entered the connecting vestibule. The scream had stopped as suddenly as it began, leaving only the hum of the train. Poirot scanned the corridor of carriage C, where a young porter, pale and wide-eyed, stood frozen. "Monsieur," Poirot said, his voice calm but commanding. "What was that sound?" The porter, a lad no older than 20, stammered. I don't know, sir. I thought it came from there." He pointed toward a locked compartment, number 12, its door sealed with a heavy brass latch. Poirot approached, his eyes narrowing. The door was unmarked, with no nameplate or passenger designation. He knocked sharply, but no response came. "Who occupies this compartment?" he asked. The porter shook his head. "It's empty, sir. No one booked it. The conductor said so." Poirot's moustache twitched. An empty compartment, yet a scream. He tried the handle, finding it locked tight. "Fetch the conductor at once," he ordered. The porter scurried off, and Poirot examined the door frame. A faint scratch mark, barely visible, marred the brass. A forced entry, perhaps, or a careless mistake. While awaiting the conductor, Poirot returned to carriage B, where passengers were emerging, roused by the scream. Madame Duval, wrapped in a silk shawl, clutched her pearls. "What was that dreadful noise?" she demanded, her voice trembling. Colonel Rostov, in a dressing gown, glowered from his doorway. "Some fool playing a prank, no doubt," he muttered, but his eyes darted toward carriage C. Dr. Moreau, spectacles askew, peered out, clutching his notebook as if it were a shield. Signora Bellini, dramatic as ever, leaned against her doorframe, fanning herself. "Such a sound! It chills the soul," she declared. Poirot raised a hand for silence. "Mesdames et messieurs, did anyone else hear the scream, or see anything unusual?" The passengers exchanged glances, but none spoke. Their silence was telling, a tapestry of hidden truths. Poirot noted Madame Duval's flushed cheeks, Rostov's clenched fists, and Moreau's nervous grip on his pen. Signora Bellini's eyes, however, lingered on the corridor's end, where the locked compartment lay. The conductor, Monsieur Lefebvre, arrived, his pinched face paler than before. "Monsieur Poirot." "What is this disturbance?" he asked, his voice tight. Poirot gestured to the locked door. A scream was heard from this direction. "This compartment, is it truly empty?" Lefebvre nodded vigorously. "Oui, monsieur. It has been locked since Paris. No passenger, no luggage." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Then open it, s'il vous plaît." Lefebvre hesitated, fumbling with his keyring. "It is irregular, monsieur, but if you insist." He unlocked the door, revealing a small, pristine compartment. The bed was made, the desk bare, the window frosted with condensation. Yet Poirot's eyes caught a detail. A single drop of crimson on the carpet, no larger than a franc, but unmistakable. Blood. He knelt, inspecting it closely. Fresh, not yet dry. "Monsieur Lefebvre," he said softly, "this compartment is not as empty as you claim." The conductor paled further. "I swear, monsieur, I know nothing of this." Poirot stood, his expression unreadable. "We shall see. For now, lock this door again. No one enters without my permission." Lefebvre nodded, his hands trembling as he secured the latch. The passengers gathered in the corridor watched in uneasy silence. Poirot turned to them, his voice measured. "Return to your compartments, please. I shall investigate further." As the crowd dispersed, Poirot lingered, his mind racing. The scream, the locked compartment, the drop of blood. It was a puzzle, incomplete but ominous. He recalled the whispered words from the dining car, between the 5th and 6th bells. The 5th bell had sounded, and already the air was thick with suspicion. What would the 6th bell bring? Back in his compartment, Poirot added to his notebook, "Scream, carriage C, compartment 12. Blood, fresh, conductor's nervousness. Passenger's silence." He tapped his pen, considering the glove in his pocket. Its monogram, LB, pointed to Signora Bellini, but her theatrics seemed too obvious. Was she a distraction or a key? And the timetable note, 5th to 6th, do not delay, suggested a plan, perhaps thwarted by the scream. The train rattled on, the Alps looming like silent sentinels outside. Poirot leaned back, closing his eyes. The 5th bell had sounded, and with it the first note of a deadly melody. He would need all his wits to unravel the score before the 6th bell rang. Chapter 3. The Locked Door. The Orient Star hummed through the snowy Alps, its rhythm unbroken, despite the shadow of unease that now clung to its corridors. Hercule Poirot stood before the locked door of compartment 12 in carriage C, his gloved hands clasped behind his back. The drop of blood on the carpet, discovered mere minutes ago, gleamed in his memory like a warning, the scream that had preceded it, sharp and fleeting, echoed in his mind. This compartment, declared empty by the conductor, was no longer a mere curiosity. It was the heart of a mystery. Poirot's little grey cells buzzed with anticipation. Monsieur Lefebvre, the conductor, hovered nearby, his pinched face a mask of anxiety. "Monsieur Poirot, I assure you, this compartment has been locked since Paris," he repeated, his voice fraying at the edges. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, fixed on him. "And yet, monsieur, there is blood. Fresh blood. You will open this door again, and we shall see what secrets it hides." Lefebvre fumbled with his keys, the clink of metal betraying his nerves. The lock clicked, and the door swung open, revealing the same pristine interior, crisp linens, a polished desk, a frosted window. But Poirot knew better than to trust appearances. He stepped inside, his cane tapping softly on the carpet. The blood drop, small but vivid, marked the floor near the bed. Poirot knelt, examining it closely. It was not smeared, suggesting no one had stepped on it. He scanned the carpet for further traces, but found none. Rising, he turned his attention to the compartment's details. The bed was undisturbed, the pillows plump, yet a faint crease in the blanket caught his eye. He lifted it, revealing a torn ticket stub wedged beneath the mattress. The ticket for the Orient Star was dated that day, but its destination was smudged, illegible. Poirot slipped it into his pocket beside the glove, and the timetable note. "Monsieur Lefebvre," Poirot said, his voice deceptively mild. "This compartment was not as empty as you claim. A ticket suggests a passenger who had access to this room." Lefebvre's eyes darted to the floor. "Only the crew, monsieur. Myself, the porters, perhaps the dining car staff. But no one has entered since we left Paris." Poirot's mustache twitched. "No one? We shall see." He moved to the desk, running a finger along its edge. A faint trace of dust suggested it had not been touched, yet a drawer was slightly ajar. Inside, he found a monogrammed handkerchief, its delicate linen embroidered with the initials E.D. Eleanor Duval, perhaps. The heiress' nervous demeanor in the corridor flashed in his mind. The handkerchief was crumpled, as if clutched tightly before being discarded. Poirot folded it carefully, adding it to his growing collection of clues. The window was next. Its frost obscured the view, but Poirot noticed a smudge on the glass, as if someone had pressed a hand against it. He tested the latch. It was secure, ruling out entry from outside. Yet the smudge was fresh, its edges sharp. "Curious," he murmured. A scream, blood, a ticket, a handkerchief, and now a handprint, each a fragment of a puzzle, each pointing to a presence in this supposedly empty space. Poirot turned to Lefebvre. "Summon the passengers from carriage bier. I wish to speak with them here." Lefebvre hesitated, then nodded, hurrying off. Poirot used the moment to inspect the walls, running his hands along the panels. A faint click near the bed revealed a hidden compartment, barely wide enough for a notebook. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a timetable not unlike the one in his pocket, but this one bore a different notation. "Fifth bell. Act swiftly." The handwriting matched the earlier note, confirming a deliberate plan tied to the train's hourly bells. The passengers arrived, their faces a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Madame Eleanor Duval clutched her shawl, her diamond earrings catching the dim light. Colonel Victor Rostov stood rigid, his eyes scanning the compartment as if assessing a battlefield. Dr. Elias Moreau clutched his notebook, his spectacles slipping down his nose. Signora Lucia Bellini, ever theatrical, leaned against the doorframe, her scarlet shawl trailing like a banner. The mysterious man in the grey suit, whom Poirot had seen in the dining car, lingered at the back, his face still shadowed by his fedora. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding. "A scream was heard from this direction, and I have found evidence of a presence here, a presence that should not be. A drop of blood, a ticket, a handkerchief. Does anyone wish to explain?" Silence greeted him, thick with unspoken secrets. Madame Duval's fingers tightened on her shawl, and Poirot held up the handkerchief. "Madame, is this yours? The initials suggest so." Her face paled. I lost one like it yesterday, she stammered, but I never entered this compartment. Colonel Rostov snorted. This is nonsense. An empty room. A drop of blood. Hardly a crime. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Yet, Colonel, you check your watch often. Were you expecting something at the fifth bell? Rostov's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Doctor, Moreau shifted uneasily. His notebook pressed to his chest. Signora Bellini laughed. A brittle sound. Monsieur Poirot, you see mysteries where there are only shadows. Poirot turned to the man in the grey suit. And you, monsieur, you spoke of bells in the dining car. What did you mean? The man's eyes narrowed, but he shrugged. A figure of speech, nothing more. Poirot noted the lie, subtle but unmistakable in the man's tightened lips. He dismissed the passengers, keeping Lefebvre behind. Monsieur, your keys, who else has them? Lefebvre swallowed. Only the head porter, Jacques, but he seems trustworthy, I swear. Poirot nodded, filing the name away. Ensure this door remains locked. I will return. Back in his compartment, Poirot spread his clues on the desk: the glove, LB, the torn ticket, the handkerchief, ED, the timetable notes, and now the mental image of the handprint. The scream suggested panic, the blood suggested violence, but the absence of a body puzzled him. Had someone been injured and removed, or was this a staged distraction? The notes tied the events to the fifth and sixth bells, a deadline looming with the next hour. The train shuddered as it climbed a steep incline, the Alps looming like silent judges. Poirot leaned back, his mind weaving the clues into a pattern. The locked door was no barrier to truth. Not for Hercule Poirot. The fifth bell had sounded, and the sixth was approaching. He would be ready. Chapter 4. Shadows of motive. The Orient Star pressed through the alpine night, its wheels a steady drumbeat against the snow-laden tracks. Hercule Poirot sat in his compartment, the dim glow of a single lamp illuminating his collection of clues. The black leather glove, LB, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief, ED, and 2 timetable notes. One found under his pillow, the other in the hidden compartment of number 12. The words, 5th to 6th, do not delay, and 5th bell, act swiftly pulsed in his mind like a metronome. The 5th bell had rung, bringing a scream and a drop of blood. The 6th was approaching, and Poirot sensed the threads of a dark design tightening. He rose, adjusting his tie with precision, and stepped into the corridor of carriage beer. The air was heavy, the silence punctuated by the distant clink of glasses from the dining car. Poirot's mission was clear: to probe the passengers, to peel back the veneer of civility and uncover the motives that lurked beneath. A crime, he was certain, was in motion, whether already committed or still to come. His little grey cells demanded answers. In the dining car, the passengers had gathered for a late supper, their faces lit by the soft flicker of chandeliers. Madame Eleanor Duval sat alone, her fingers tracing the rim of a wineglass, her diamond earrings catching the light. Colonel Victor Rostov occupied a corner table, his posture rigid as he scanned a newspaper with feigned interest. Dr. Elias Moreau scribbled in his notebook, his spectacles glinting with every furtive glance. Signora Lucia Bellini held court at the center, her laughter bright but brittle as she recounted a Milanese opera triumph. The man in the grey suit, whom Poirot had yet to name, lingered near the bar, his fedora tilted to shadow his eyes. Poirot took a seat near Madame Duval, ordering a tisane to blend into the scene. "Madame," he began, his voice smooth as velvet, "you seem troubled. Is it the scream we heard or something more personal?" Her hand froze on the glass, her eyes darting to his. "Monsieur Poirot, I am merely tired," she said, but her voice trembled. Poirot leaned closer, and the handkerchief, monogrammed ED, found in the locked compartment. "You claim to have lost one like it." Her cheeks flushed. "I told you, it was mislaid. I know nothing of that room." He produced the handkerchief, holding it delicately. "This was clutched, madame, as if in fear. Have you received a threat, perhaps?" Her eyes widened, and after a moment she reached into her purse, withdrawing a folded letter. "This came yesterday in Paris," she whispered, handing it to him. Poirot unfolded it, reading the typed words, "Beware the bells. Your secrets will not stay buried." No signature, no postmark. "Who sent this?" he asked. She shook her head. "I don't know. I thought it a cruel jest." Poirot pocketed the letter, his mind racing. A threat tied to the bells. Another thread in the tapestry. He moved to Colonel Rostov, who looked up from his newspaper with a scowl. "Monsieur Poirot, must you hound us all?" Poirot smiled thinly. "Colonel, your watch-checking at the fifth bell was most precise. Were you expecting an event?" Rostov's jaw tightened. "I am a man of habit. Nothing more." Poirot pressed further. "And your connection to Madame Duval? I observed you speaking in Paris before boarding." Rostov's eyes flashed. "A coincidence. We shared a cab once, years ago. Nothing more." The lie was subtle, but Poirot caught it in the Colonel's tightened grip on the newspaper. He moved on to Dr. Moreau, whose nervous scribbling paused as Poirot approached. "Doctor, your notebook fascinates me. May I see it?" Moreau clutched it closer. "It's private. Research notes." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Research on what? Timetables, perhaps, or the significance of bells?" Moreau's spectacles slipped. "I study linguistics. Nothing to do with this nonsense." Yet his fingers trembled, betraying unease. Signora Bellini, overhearing, waved a hand dramatically. "Monsieur Poirot, you see conspiracies everywhere. This train is a stage, and we are merely players." Poirot turned to her, holding up the glove. "And this, Signora, L.B., your initials non." She laughed, but her eyes flickered. "A common monogram. I have no such glove." Poirot noted her deflection, as practiced as her operatic roles. The man in the grey suit remained elusive, slipping out before Poirot could question him further. Instead, Poirot approached the conductor, Monsieur Lefebvre, who was overseeing the dining-car staff. "Monsieur, the head porter, Jacques. Where is he?" Lefebvre's face tightened. "He's tending to luggage in carriage D." "Why?" Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "Because someone entered compartment 12, someone with a key." Lefebvre paled. "I swear, monsieur, I know nothing of this." Poirot returned to his table, his mind weaving connections. Madame Duval's threatening letter suggested blackmail, possibly linked to her wealth. Colonel Rostov's past, with her hinted at a shared secret, perhaps a dispute over money or honor. Dr. Moreau's guarded notebook could conceal knowledge of the timetable notes. Signora Bellini's theatricality might mask cunning, and the man in the grey suit's evasiveness marked him as a key player. The locked compartment with its blood and clues pointed to a plan interrupted or a crime concealed. As the train slowed, caught in a sudden delay, amidst the snowy peaks, the dining car grew quieter. Poirot felt the weight of unseen eyes, the killer or killers watching his every move. He added to his notebook, threatening letter, Madame Duval, Rostov's lie, Moreau's secrecy, Bellini's deflection, grey suit's escape. The clues were mounting, but the picture remained incomplete. A porter announced the delay, citing snow on the tracks. The passengers murmured, their unease palpable. Poirot leaned back, sipping his tisane. The fifth bell had brought a scream and blood. The sixth was yet to come. The threatening letter, like the timetable notes, pointed to a deadline. Was it murder, blackmail, or something more intricate? The shadows of motive were lengthening, and Poirot knew the truth lay in their overlap. The train lurched forward. Resuming its journey, Poirot's eyes scanned the room, catching a fleeting glance between Madame Duval and Colonel Rostov, a glance that spoke of history, fear, and perhaps betrayal. The killer, he sensed, was among them, hiding in plain sight. The sixth bell was approaching, and with it the next act of this deadly drama. Chapter 5. The sixth bell sets silence. The Orient Star wound through the alpine darkness, its passage marked by the relentless rhythm of wheels against rails. Hercule Poirot sat in his compartment, the clues he had gathered spread before him, the black leather glove, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief, the threatening letter to Madame Duval, and the two timetable notes, one urging action between the 5th and 6th bells, the other demanding swiftness at the 5th. The scream and the drop of blood in compartment 12 had set his little grey cells ablaze, and now, as the hour approached, he awaited the 6th bell with a sense of inevitability. The train's rhythm faltered, slowed by the snow-packed tracks, and the expected chime of the 6th bell due at 6 o'clock did not come. The silence was jarring, a void where sound should have been. Poirot's moustache twitched as he checked his pocket watch, its hands confirming the hour. He rose, sensing that this omission was no mere mechanical failure. Slipping his notebook into his coat, he stepped into the corridor of carriage B, where the air was thick with unease. The passengers, roused by the train's sluggish pace and the missing bell, had begun to gather in the corridor. Madame Eleanor Duval, her face pale beneath her powdered cheeks, clutched her shawl. Colonel Victor Rostov stood rigid, his eyes darting toward the connecting vestibule to carriage C. Elias Moreau, clutching his ever-present notebook, muttered about schedules. Signora Lucia Bellini, her scarlet shawl trailing, leaned against a wall, her expression more curious than alarmed. The man in the grey suit, still nameless, lingered at the edge of the group, his fedora low. Before Poirot could address them, a porter burst from the direction of carriage D, his face ashen. "Monsieur Poirot, Monsieur Lefebvre needs you at once," the young man gasped. "In the baggage car. There's a body." The passengers froze, their murmurs silenced. Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Lead the way," he commanded, his voice steady despite the electric tension. The baggage car, accessed through a narrow passage beyond carriage, was a cavern of crates and trunks, dimly lit by a single swaying bulb. "Monsieur Lefebvre." The conductor stood near a stack of luggage, his hands trembling. "Monsieur Poirot. I found him just now," he stammered, pointing to a figure slumped against a leather trunk. Poirot approached, his cane tapping softly, and knelt beside the body. It was Monsieur Henri Valois, a wealthy financier whose presence in the dining car had been fleeting but notable, a man of sharp suits and sharper words. He was dead, a single stab wound piercing his chest with surgical precision. Blood had pooled beneath him, staining the wooden floor, yet the wound was clean, suggesting a swift and practiced hand. Poirot's gloved fingers traced the air above the body, noting the angle of the blade's entry, straight, deliberate, between the 5th and 6th ribs. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning the scene. Valois' left hand was empty, but his right clutched a silver pocket watch. Its face cracked, stopped at precisely 5:50, 10 minutes before the 6th bell should have rung. The watch's chain was tangled, as if yanked in a struggle. Poirot examined the body further, finding no other wounds but noting a faint bruise on Valois' wrist, suggesting he had been restrained briefly before the fatal blow. "Monsieur Lefebvre," Poirot said, rising. "When did you last see Monsieur Valois alive?" The conductor wiped his brow. "At dinner, monsieur, around 4 o'clock. He was arguing with someone. I didn't see who." Poirot's gaze narrowed. "And this baggage car, who has access?" Lefebvre hesitated. "Only the crew, monsieur. Myself, Jacques the porter, and the baggage handler. But the door was unlocked when I came to check the cargo." Poirot turned to the surrounding luggage, his eyes catching a glint beneath a crate. He retrieved a small brass key, its surface scratched but intact. It was not a standard train key, suggesting it belonged to a private lock, perhaps a trunk or a safe. He pocketed it, adding it to his collection of clues. The baggage car's floor revealed no footprints, but a faint smear of blood trailed toward a corner where a canvas bag lay partially open. Inside, Poirot found a folded newspaper, dated that morning, with a headline circled in red ink: "Financier implicated in smuggling scandal." Valois' name was underlined. The passengers, now gathered at the baggage car's entrance, peered in with a mix of horror and fascination. Madame Duval gasped, covering her mouth. "He was murdered," she whispered. Colonel Rostov's face was impassive, but his fingers twitched. "Doctor, Moreau's spectacles slipped as he scribbled furiously. Signora Bellini's eyes gleamed, as if the drama were a stage play. The man in the grey suit had vanished, Poirot noted, his absence as telling as his earlier evasions. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot announced, his voice cutting through the murmurs. Monsieur Valois was killed between the 5th and 6th bells, as the timetable notes suggested. I urge anyone with information to speak now. Silence met him, thick with secrets. He held up the pocket watch. This stopped at 5:50. Who saw Monsieur Valois after dinner? No one answered, but Madame Duval's eyes flickered toward Rostov, who stared straight ahead. Poirot dismissed the passengers, instructing Lefebvre to secure the baggage car. Back in his compartment, he spread his clues on the desk: the glove, the ticket, the handkerchief, the threatening letter, the timetable notes, the brass key, and now the newspaper. The murder confirmed his fears. A plan tied to the bells had culminated in death. Valois' scandal hinted at in the newspaper suggested a motive: blackmail, revenge, or silencing a witness. The stopped watch pinpointed the time, aligning with the scream and the blood in compartment 12. The train lurched forward, the snow delay easing. Poirot added to his notebook: Valois, stabbed, 5:50. Watch stopped. Key, newspaper with smuggling headline. Blood trail in baggage car. The silence of the 6th bell was no accident, he suspected. Perhaps sabotage to mask the crime's timing. The killer was among them, their motive hidden in the web of connections he had begun to unravel. Duval's letter, Rostov's lie, Moreau's secrecy, Bellini's theatrics, the grey suit's disappearance. As the Alps loomed outside, Poirot leaned back, his mind racing. The 6th bell's silence marked the first death, but he feared it would not be the last. The killer had struck with precision, and the next move was imminent. Hercule Poirot would be waiting. Chapter 6. Alibis and Alarms. The Orient Star rattled through the snowy Alps, its opulent interiors now steeped in the chill of murder. Hercule Poirot stood in the baggage car, the image of Henry Valois' lifeless body stabbed with precision, his pocket watch frozen at 5:50, etched in his mind. The silence of the 6th bell, which should have rung at 6 o'clock, hung like a shroud over the train. Poirot's little grey cells churned, weaving together his clues: the black leather glove, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief, the threatening letter to Madame Duval, the timetable notes, the brass key, and the newspaper hinting at Valois' smuggling scandal. The murder was no random act. It was a calculated move in a deadly game tied to the train's hourly bells. Poirot returned to carriage B, his cane, tapping a steady rhythm as he prepared to interrogate the passengers. Their alibis for the critical window between the 5th bell, 5 o'clock, and the 6th, 6 o'clock would reveal much truths, lies, or the gaps between. He summoned them to the dining car, where the chandeliers cast a flickering glow over velvet seats now empty save for the assembled suspects. The air was thick with tension, the passengers' faces a gallery of unease. Madame Eleanor Duval sat first, her diamond earrings glinting as she twisted her hands. Madame Poirot began, his voice calm but piercing. "Where were you between 5 and 6 this morning, when Monsieur Valois met his end?" Her eyes darted to the window, avoiding his gaze. "In my compartment, number 5, she said. "I was reading. The scream woke me, but I stayed inside." Poirot leaned forward. "And did you see or hear anything else? Monsieur Valois, perhaps, or another passenger?" She shook her head too quickly. "No one. I was alone." Poirot noted her trembling fingers, a stark contrast to her poised facade. Next was Colonel Victor Rostov, his military bearing strained by the weight of scrutiny. "Colonel, your movements during that hour?" Poirot asked, his eyes fixed on the man's clenched fists. Rostov's voice was gruff. "I was in my compartment number 8 reviewing dispatches. I heard the scream but assumed it was a passenger's nightmare." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Yet you were in the corridor shortly after." "None? And your watch checking at the 5th bell suggests a keen interest in time." Rostov's jaw tightened. "I am precise, Monsieur Poirot. Nothing more." The lie was subtle, buried in his rigid posture. Dr. Elias Moreau approached, clutching his notebook like a talisman. "Doctor, your alibi?" Poirot inquired, noting the scholar's nervous tick, a slight twitch of the lip. "I was in my compartment number 6, writing," Moreau said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Linguistic notes. The scream startled me, but I didn't leave until the porter's commotion." Poirot tilted his head. "And your notebook, may I see it? It may hold clues to the timetable notes." Moreau's grip tightened. "It's private, monsieur. Irrelevant." Poirot's smile was thin. "In a murder, doctor, nothing is irrelevant." Signora Lucia Bellini swept in, her scarlet shawl a splash of color against the dining car's muted tones. "Signora," Poirot said, holding up the glove, "this bears your initials, L.B. Where were you when the 5th bell sounded?" Her laugh was musical but strained. "In my compartment, number 9, practicing arias in my head. I heard no scream, only the train's hum." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this glove? Lost or placed to mislead?" She waved a hand dismissively. "I told you, it's not mine. Many have such initials." Her nonchalance was too polished, Poirot noted, like a rehearsed performance. The man in the grey suit, whom Poirot now identified as Monsieur Paul Renard after checking the passenger manifest, was last. His fedora remained low, shadowing his sharp features. "Monsieur Renard, you spoke of bells in the dining car," Poirot said. "Where were you between 5 and 6? Renard's voice was smooth, almost too calm. "In my compartment, number 10. Reading. I heard nothing unusual." Poirot pressed further. "And your conversation about the 5th and 6th bells? A mere figure of speech, you said." Renard's lips curled slightly. "Exactly so." The evasion was blatant, his eyes too steady to be truthful. Poirot dismissed the passengers, retaining Monsieur Lefebvre, the conductor. "Monsieur, the baggage car door was unlocked," Poirot said, his tone sharp. "Who else had access?" Lefebvre's hands shook. "Only Jacques, the head porter, and the baggage handler, Pierre, but they were on duty elsewhere." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And the 6th bell's failure to ring? A mechanical fault or sabotage?" Lefebvre swallowed.
I don't know, monsieur."
"The bell system is checked daily." Poirot nodded, filing away the conductor's fear. Alone in the dining car, Poirot reviewed his notes. Duval, compartment, reading, trembling. Rostov, dispatches, corridor presence. Moreau, writing, secretive. Bellini, arias, dismissive. Renard, reading, evasive. Lefebvre, nervous, vague. Each alibi was fragile, riddled with inconsistencies. Duval's trembling suggested fear, perhaps of exposure. Rostov's corridor presence contradicted his claim of solitude. Moreau's notebook was a mystery in itself. Bellini's theatrics masked something deeper, and Renard's calm was too calculated. The unlocked baggage car and the silent 6th bell pointed to a crew member's involvement, or an outsider with access. A sudden jolt shook the train, and an alarm bell rang, not the hourly chime, but a sharp mechanical wail signaling a problem. Poirot hurried to the vestibule where Lefebvre was conferring with Jacques, the head porter. "Monsieur, a signal failure ahead," Jacques explained, his young face tense. "We're stopped again." Poirot's mind raced. A delay so soon after a murder was no coincidence. It gave the killer time to hide evidence, to strike again, or to escape scrutiny. Back in his compartment, Poirot added to his notebook. Alibis contradictory. Baggage car access unclear. 6th bell sabotaged. Signal failure suspicious. The brass key from the baggage car nagged at him. Did it unlock a trunk, a safe, or something more sinister? The newspaper's smuggling headline suggested Valois was a target. But why now, between the 5th and 6th bells? The threatening letter to Duval hinted at blackmail, possibly linked to Valois' scandal. The train remained still, the Alps looming outside like silent witnesses. Poirot leaned back, his eyes half closed. The passengers' lives were a tangled web, but the truth lay in their intersections. The killer had struck once, and the alarm bell's wail felt like a prelude to another act. Poirot's task was clear: to unravel the alibis before the next bell or the next body. Chapter 7. The Hidden Timetable. The Orient Star stood motionless in the snowy Alpine pass, its engines hushed by a signal failure that felt to Hercule Poirot like a deliberate pause in a deadly game. The murder of Henry Valois, stabbed between the 5th and 6th bells, had cast a pall over the train, and the passengers' flimsy alibis, Madame Duval's trembling denial, Colonel Rostof's curt evasions, Dr. Moreau's secretive scribbling, Signora Bellini's theatrical dismissal, and Monsieur Renard's calculated calm had only deepened the mystery. Poirot's collection of clues lay on his compartment desk: the black leather glove, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief, the threatening letter, the 2 timetable notes, the brass key, and the newspaper hinting at Valois' smuggling scandal. The silent 6th bell and the train's sudden halt suggested a killer orchestrating events with chilling precision. Poirot, his moustache impeccably groomed despite the hour, resolved to search Valois' luggage for further evidence. The baggage car, now secured under his orders, was his destination. He slipped into the corridor of carriage-bray, the dim sconces casting long shadows. The passengers had retreated to their compartments, but Poirot felt their unseen eyes, watchful and wary. He reached the baggage car, where the porter Jacques stood guard, his youthful face taut with unease. "Monsieur Poirot, no one has entered," he said, stepping aside. The baggage car was a maze of trunks and crates, the air heavy with the scent of leather and dust. Valois's body had been moved to a locked storage room, but the blood stain on the floor remained, a grim marker of the crime. Poirot located Valois's trunk, a sleek black case with brass fittings, its lock scratched as if tampered with. The brass key from Chapter 5 fit perfectly, clicking open with a satisfying snap. Inside, Poirot found neatly folded clothes, a leather-bound ledger, and tucked beneath a silk tie, a second timetable distinct from the train's official schedule. This timetable was a single sheet, its edges worn, marked with cryptic symbols, a series of triangles, circles, and slashes in black ink, arranged in a grid beside times and station names. One entry stood out: 5:50, Alpine Pass, Delta. The triangle symbol, bold and deliberate, matched the time on Valois' broken watch. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A code, perhaps, he murmured, or a signal for a rendezvous that ended in death. The timetable listed other times and symbols, suggesting a broader scheme, possibly the smuggling operation hinted at in the newspaper. Poirot examined the ledger next, its pages filled with cryptic entries, dates, initials, and sums in Swiss francs. One entry caught his eye: ED 10,000, Paris, the 24th of July, Eleanor Duval. The sum was substantial, hinting at blackmail or a payoff. Another entry read, VR, Istanbul, Delta, Victor Rostov. The triangle symbol linked the ledger to the timetable, tying the passengers to Valois' dealings. Poirot pocketed the timetable, leaving the ledger for now, and sealed the trunk. The symbols demanded expertise beyond his own, and one passenger came to mind: Dr. Elias Moreau, the linguist with a guarded notebook. Returning to carriage B, Poirot knocked on Moreau's door, number 6. The scholar opened it, his spectacles askew, his face pale. "Monsieur Poirot." "It's late," he said, clutching his notebook. Poirot's smile was disarming. "Doctor, your expertise in linguistics is needed. I have found a document with symbols, perhaps a code. Will you assist?" Moreau hesitated, his fingers tightening on the notebook. "I suppose I could look," he said, stepping into the corridor. In the dining car, under the chandelier's soft glow, Poirot spread the timetable on a table. Moreau's eyes widened briefly before he schooled his expression. "These symbols," he said, adjusting his spectacles, "are not linguistic. They resemble a cipher used in trade. Smuggling, perhaps. The triangle, Delta, often denotes a delivery point." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And you know this how, Doctor?" Moreau flushed. "I've studied obscure notations in my research." It's academic. Poirot noted the lie, subtle in the scholar's quickened breath. Doctor, Poirot pressed. Your notebook, does it contain such ciphers? Moreau's grip tightened. No, monsieur. My work is on phonetics. Poirot held up the timetable. This was in Valois' trunk, marked at 5:50, the time of his death. You were in your compartment, you said, writing. Yet you know smuggling ciphers. Moreau's lips twitched. A coincidence, he muttered, but his eyes darted away. Poirot dismissed Moreau, his suspicions growing. The scholar's knowledge was too precise, his evasiveness too pronounced. Back in his compartment, Poirot added to his clues the hidden timetable, its symbols linking to Valois' murder and a smuggling ring. He sketched the triangle in his notebook, alongside Moreau, cipher knowledge, secretive, ledger, EDVR, payments. The connections were forming. Duval's threatening letter, Rostov's shared past with her, and now Moreau's familiarity with codes suggested a network of deceit. The train jolted, signaling the repair of the signal failure. As it resumed its journey, Poirot overheard a whispered exchange outside his door. It's done, a low voice said. Renard's, he suspected. Keep quiet, another replied. Possibly Lefebvre. Poirot opened his door, but the corridor was empty. The voices swallowed by the train's hum. He added to his notebook. Renard, overheard conspiracy. Lefebvre, complicit. The passengers were a tapestry of motives. Duval's blackmail, Rostov's history, Moreau's codes, Bellini's theatrics, masking guile, Renard's shadowy presence. The timetable symbols suggested a planned operation, interrupted by Valois' death. Was he a victim of betrayal, or a loose end tied off? The brass key, the glove, the handkerchief, all pointed to a killer among them, perhaps aided by the crew. Poirot leaned back, the Alps gliding past his window like silent sentinels. The hidden timetable was a map to the crime, its symbols a language of deceit. The sixth bell's silence had marked Valois' end, but the next bell, whenever it came, would bring new revelations. Poirot's task was to decode the truth before the killer struck again. Chapter 8. Whispers in the dining car. The Orient Star glided through the alpine night, its wheels a steady cadence against the snow-dusted tracks, though the air inside was heavy with the weight of Henry Valois' murder. Hercule Poirot, his moustache impeccably waxed, sat in his compartment, reviewing his growing collection of clues. The black leather glove, L.B., the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief, E.D., the threatening letter to Madame Eleanor Duval, the 2 timetable notes, the brass key, the newspaper hinting at Valois' smuggling scandal, and the newly discovered coded timetable with its cryptic symbols. The silence of the sixth bell and Dr. Elias Moreau's knowledge of smuggling ciphers had tightened the web of suspicion. As the train resumed its journey after the signal delay, Poirot resolved to observe the passengers at dinner, where the dining car would serve as a stage for their secrets. He entered the dining car at 8 o'clock, the chandeliers casting a golden glow over white linen and crystal glassware. The passengers summoned for the evening meal sat in uneasy clusters, their polite smiles masking fear and calculation. Madame Duval, her diamond earrings glinting, sipped her wine with trembling hands. Colonel Victor Rostov, rigid as ever, cut his steak with military precision, his eyes scanning the room. Dr. Moreau, his notebook absent but his spectacles slipping, picked at his food. Signora Lucia Bellini, her scarlet shawl draped dramatically, laughed too loudly at a waiter's remark. Monsieur Paul Renard, the man in the grey suit, sat alone, his fedora on the table, his sharp features unreadable. Poirot chose a corner table, ordering a simple consommé to maintain his focus. His little grey cells were attuned to every gesture, every glance. The dining car was a theatre of whispers, and he was its most attentive audience. As the waiter served the first course, Poirot noticed Madame Duval's eyes flicker toward Rostov, a fleeting look of recognition or fear. Rostov returned the glance, his knife pausing mid-cut, a muscle twitching in his jaw. A shared history, Poirot thought, recalling the ledger entry linking VR to Valois' smuggling. Across the room, Dr. Moreau dropped his fork, the clatter drawing a sharp glance from Signora Bellini. She leaned toward him, murmuring something Poirot couldn't catch, her hand brushing his sleeve. Moreau's face flushed, and he adjusted his spectacles, nodding curtly. An alliance, perhaps, or a warning. Poirot's mind flashed to Moreau's knowledge of ciphers, wondering if Bellini's theatrics concealed a deeper role in the coded timetable scheme. Renard, meanwhile, sat apart, his eyes fixed on a point beyond the window, though the darkness outside revealed only the Alps' snowy silhouette. As a waiter refilled his glass, Renard's hand moved swiftly, slipping a folded note beneath his napkin. Poirot's gaze sharpened. Was it a message or another clue? Before he could act, a glass of red wine tipped over at Madame Duval's table, the liquid spilling across the tablecloth. She gasped, dabbing at the stain with her napkin. "How clumsy of me," she said, her voice strained. Poirot rose, approaching her table under the guise of offering assistance. "Madame." "Allow me," he said, retrieving a fresh napkin from a waiter. As he handed it to her, he noticed the stain on the tablecloth, a deep crimson that matched the handkerchief VD from compartment 12. "A curious coincidence, non," he said softly. "This shade of red, it reminds me of something found in a locked room." Duval's hand froze, her eyes wide. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered, but her fingers clutched the napkin tightly. Returning to his table, Poirot added to his mental notes, the glance between Duval and Rostov, Moreau and Bellini's whispered exchange, Renard's hidden note, and the wine stain echoing the handkerchief. The dining car was a microcosm of deceit, each interaction a thread in the tapestry of Valois' murder. He sipped his consommé, his eyes never leaving the passengers. The waiter, clearing plates, paused near Renard's table, and Poirot caught a subtle handoff. The note passed to the waiter, who slipped it into his pocket. A conspirator among the crew, perhaps. Poirot beckoned Monsieur Lefebvre, the conductor, who approached with his usual nervous demeanor. "Monsieur, your waiter, is he trustworthy?" Poirot asked, his voice low. Lefebvre's eyes darted to the waiter in question. "Pierre? He's new, monsieur, but reliable." Poirot's smile was thin. "And yet he carries messages. Observe him closely." Lefebvre nodded, his face paling, and hurried away. As dessert was served, Signora Bellini rose, her shawl sweeping the floor. "A toast," she declared, raising her glass to safe travels and secrets kept. The passengers joined reluctantly, their glasses clinking with forced cheer. Poirot watched Rostov, whose toast was curt, his eyes locked on Duval. Moreau's glass trembled, spilling a drop of champagne. Renard drank slowly, his gaze fixed on the waiter, Pierre, who moved toward the kitchen. Poirot followed Pierre under the pretense of requesting more tea. In the narrow passage to the kitchen, he intercepted the waiter. "Monsieur." "A word," Poirot said, his tone firm. Pierre froze, his hand in his pocket. "The note you received from Monsieur Renard. Show it to me." Pierre's eyes widened, but under Poirot's unrelenting stare, he produced a crumpled paper. It read, "Keep the schedule." Sixth bell was a warning. Poirot's mustache twitched, another reference to the bells confirming the timetable's significance. He dismissed Pierre, keeping the note, and returned to the dining car. The passengers were dispersing, their faces etched with strain. Poirot added to his notebook, Duval Rostov glance, shared history. Moreau Bellini whisper, possible alliance. Renard's note, crew involvement. Wine stain matches handkerchief. The dining car had revealed more than its menu, a network of motives and conspiracies, with Valois' murder at its center. The train's rhythm resumed, the Alps gliding past like silent judges. Poirot leaned back, his mind weaving the night's observations into the broader puzzle. The timetable symbols, the smuggling scandal, the threatening letter all pointed to a scheme larger than one death. The waiter's role suggested the crew was compromised, and the sixth bell's silence was no accident. The killer or killers was among them, their next move hidden in the whispers of the dining car. Chapter 9. The Conductor Sept Secret. The Orient Star sliced through the alpine night, its opulent carriages cloaked in the unease of Henry Velouet's murder. Hercule Poirot, his moustache, a study in precision, sat in his compartment, the weight of his clues pressing upon his little grey cells. The black leather glove, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief ED, the threatening letter to Madame Eleanor Duval, the timetable notes, the brass key, the newspaper hinting at Velouet's smuggling scandal, the coded timetable with its cryptic symbols, and the note passed by Monsieur Paul Renard in the dining car, all formed a tapestry of deceit. The whispers of the dining car, the crew's involvement, and the silent sixth bell pointed to a conspiracy deeper than a single death. Poirot's focus now turned to Monsieur Lefebvre, the conductor, whose nervous demeanor and evasive answers suggested a secret he could no longer conceal. Poirot found Lefebvre in the vestibule between carriages build and sea, checking the train's logbook with trembling hands. The dim light cast shadows on his pinched face, accentuating the lines of worry. "Monsieur Lefebvre," Poirot said, his voice calm but unyielding. "A word, if you please." Lefebvre flinched, nearly dropping the logbook. "Monsieur Poirot, I am busy." "The train's schedule." Poirot raised a hand. "The schedule, monsieur, is precisely why we must speak. The sixth bell did not ring, and a man is dead. Your nerves betray you. What do you hide?" Lefebvre's eyes darted to the corridor, ensuring they were alone. "I hide nothing, monsieur," he said, but his voice cracked. Poirot stepped closer, his gaze piercing. "You claimed compartment 12 was empty, yet I found blood. You said the baggage car was secure, yet it was unlocked. And the note passed by Monsieur Renard. Keep the schedule. Sixth bell was a warning. Suggests you know more than you admit." Lefebvre's face paled, his fingers clutching the logbook like a lifeline. Poirot produced the brass key from his pocket. This was found near Valouas's body. It unlocked his trunk, revealing a coded timetable. Who else has such keys? Lefebvre swallowed hard. "Only the crew, monsieur, myself, Jacques Pierre. But I swear I didn't." Poirot cut him off. "You altered the logbook." "None. I observed you in the dining car, erasing an entry." "Why?" Lefebvre's shoulders slumped, defeat etching his features. "I had no choice," he whispered. Under Poirot's relentless stare, Lefebvre confessed. "It was a small thing at first. A passenger, Madame Duval, asked me to adjust the logbook, to omit her late boarding in Paris. She said it was to avoid scandal, a private matter. I took a small payment." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this payment, it was not so small, I think." "What else did she ask?" Lefebvre hesitated, then reached into his pocket, producing a torn photograph. "This fell from her purse when she paid me. I kept it, thinking it might be useful." The photograph, creased and ripped, showed a younger Madame Duval, radiant in a summer dress, standing beside a man whose face was obscured by the tear. The background was a Parisian café, its awning marked Café de la Paix. Poirot's moustache twitched. "This man, who is he?" Lefebvre shook his head. "I don't know, monsieur, but she was desperate to keep it hidden." Poirot pocketed the photograph, adding it to his clues. "And Valois? Did he know of this photograph or her secret?" Lefebvre's eyes widened. "I never spoke to him, but he argued with her in Paris. Before we boarded, I overheard him mention a debt." Poirot's mind raced. Duval's threatening letter, the ledger entry ED 10,000, and now this photograph suggested blackmail tied to a past relationship. Was Valois the man in the photo, or a witness to her secret? The conductor's complicity in altering the logbook pointed to a broader scheme, possibly linked to the smuggling ring indicated by the timetable symbols. "Monsieur Lefebvre," Poirot said, his tone firm, "you will show me the logbook." Lefebvre handed it over, his hands shaking. Poirot scanned the pages, noting an erased entry for carriage bay, compartment 5. Duval's. The original entry listed a second passenger, initials HV. He scratched out. Henri Valois. Had he shared her compartment briefly, or was this a cover-up? Poirot closed the logbook, his expression unreadable. "You will speak of this to no one," he instructed. Lefebvre nodded, retreating with a look of dread. Back in the dining car, now nearly empty, Poirot observed the passengers from a distance. Madame Duval sat alone, her wine untouched, her eyes fixed on the window's dark reflection. Colonel Rostov, at a corner table, glanced at her, his face a mask of restraint. Doctor, Moreau scribbled in his notebook, his movements furtive. Signora Bellini, her shawl slipping, laughed with the waiter, but her eyes darted toward Renard, who lingered near the bar, his fedora back in place. The connections were tightening. Duval's secret, Rostov's history with her, Moreau's ciphers, Bellini's guile, Renard's cryptic note. Poirot added to his notebook, Lefebvre, altered logbook, Duval's payment, torn photograph, Parisian café, Valois-Duval argument, debt. The photograph was a new thread, linking Duval to a past that Valois may have exploited. The logbook's erased entry suggested she concealed a connection to the victim, perhaps to hide a motive for murder. The timetable's symbols and Renard's note pointed to a larger scheme, with the crew, Lefebvre, Pierre, or Jacques, potentially complicit. The train's rhythm steadied. The Alps gliding past like silent judges. Poirot leaned back, his mind weaving the clues into a pattern. The conductor's secret had cracked open a door to the truth, but the full picture remained elusive. Was Duval the killer, driven by blackmail, or a pawn in a larger game? The sixth bell's silence had marked Valois's death, and the next bell, if it rang, would herald the killer's next move. Poirot's gaze fell on the photograph, its torn edge a silent accusation. The man's identity, obscured but vital, was a key to the motive. He would confront Duval, but first he needed to trace the photograph's origins. The Orient Star was a stage, its players bound by secrets, and Hercule Poirot was determined to unmask them before the final curtain fell. Chapter 10. The snowbound trap. The Orient Star stood still, ensnared by a ferocious blizzard that had swept down from the Alps, blanketing the tracks in snow and ice. The train's opulent interiors, once a haven of luxury, now felt like a gilded cage, the air thick with the spectre of Henry Valois' murder. Hercule Poirot, his moustache, a beacon of order amidst chaos, sat in his compartment, his collection of clues spread before him, the black leather glove, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief E.D., the threatening letter to Madame Eleanor Duval, the timetable notes, the brass key, the newspaper hinting at Valois' smuggling scandal, the coded timetable with its cryptic symbols, the note from Monsieur Paul Renard, and the torn photograph from Monsieur Lefebvre. The conductor's confession, altering the logbook for Duval and withholding the photograph, had tightened the web of suspicion. Now, with the train halted, Poirot saw an opportunity to act, to search the passengers' luggage for answers before the killer could cover their tracks. The blizzard howled outside, rattling the windows of carriage bore. Poirot stepped into the corridor where the passengers had gathered, their faces etched with frustration and fear. Madame Duval clutched her shawl, her diamond earrings dull in the dim light. Colonel Victor Rostov stood rigid, his eyes scanning the group as if assessing threats. Dr. Elias Moreau gripped his notebook, his spectacles fogged by the cold. Signora Lucia Bellini, her scarlet shawl slipping, murmured complaints about the delay. Monsieur Renard, his fedora low, leaned against a wall, his sharp features unreadable. The atmosphere was taut, the murder's shadow lengthening in the confined space. Poirot addressed the group, his voice calm but commanding. Mesdames et messieurs, this delay is unfortunate, but it allows me to continue my investigation. I must search your luggage for evidence related to Monsieur Valois' death. I trust you will cooperate. Murmurs of protest rose, but Poirot's gaze silenced them. Refusal will only deepen suspicion, he added, his eyes lingering on Renard, who shrugged with feigned indifference. With Monsieur Lefebvre's reluctant assistance, Poirot began in carriage B, starting with Madame Duval's compartment, number 5. Her trunk, elegant and monogrammed, yielded little at first: silk dresses, a jewelry case, a novel. But beneath a velvet scarf, Poirot found a folded letter, its wax seal broken, addressed to E.D. in a precise hand. The text was in code, a series of numbers and slashes, 357, Delta, Istanbul. The triangle symbol matched the coded timetable, and the numbers suggested a date or sequence. Poirot pocketed the letter, noting Duval's absence from the search. She had remained in the dining car, claiming a headache. Was this code her link to Vallot's smuggling, or a new threat? In Colonel Rostov's compartment, number 8, Poirot found military papers, a flask of vodka, and a locked cigar case. The brass key from the baggage car did not fit, but a small knife, its blade faintly stained, caught his eye. The stain was not blood but a greenish residue, suggesting poison. Poirot wrapped the knife carefully, his mind racing, poison, not a stab wound, as a secondary weapon. Rostov's connection to Duval, hinted at in the ledger VR, grew more sinister. Dr. Moreau's compartment, number 6, was cluttered with books and papers. His notebook left on the desk remained locked, but a loose page slipped from a tome on ciphers. It bore a single word. Belladonna. Poirot's mustache twitched. Belladonna, a deadly poison, linked to the greenish residue on Rostov's knife. Moreau's expertise in codes, and now poisons marked him as a key player, his scholarly facade crumbling. Signora Bellini's compartment, number 9, was a riot of color, scarves, costumes, a perfume bottle. Tucked inside a hat box was a vial of clear liquid, its label scratched off but faintly legible. Atrapa Belladonna, poison again, and Bellini's initials LB matched the glove. Was she the killer, or a scapegoat framed by another? Her theatricality, Poirot noted, could mask a cunning mind. Monsieur Renard's compartment, number 10, was sparse, almost too clean. A hidden panel under the bed revealed a small safe, locked. The brass key did not fit, but a folded map of Istanbul, marked with the same triangle symbol, lay beside it. Renard's note about the 6th bell and his evasiveness suggested he was orchestrating something larger, a smuggling drop, perhaps, with Valois as a casualty. Poirot returned to the dining car, where the passengers sat in tense silence, the blizzard's howl a constant reminder of their isolation. He added to his notebook, coded letter Duval, delta symbol, Rostov's knife, poison residue. Moreau, Belladonna note. Bellini, poison vial. Renard, Istanbul map, delta. The clues pointed to a smuggling ring, with poison as a potential weapon. The photograph's torn man, possibly Valois, tied Duval to a past she feared exposed. As Poirot sipped a tisane, Lefebvre approached, his face pale. Monsieur, the crew is restless. Pierre, the waiter, hasn't been seen since dinner. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Pierre, who had passed Renard's note, was now missing, a conspirator on the run or another victim. The snowbound train was a trap, locking killer and prey together. Poirot felt the weight of unseen eyes, the killer watching his every move. He addressed the passengers, his voice cutting through the storm's din. Mesdames et messieurs, the blizzard has given us time, but it also protects the killer. Evidence mounts, codes, poison, secrets. Speak now, or the truth will find you. Silence met him. But Duval's hands trembled, Rostov's jaw clenched, and Moreau's spectacles slipped. Bellini's laugh was brittle, and Renard's gaze was too steady. The train's lights flickered, plunging the dining car into momentary darkness. A gasp rose, and when the lights returned, a single candle had fallen, its wax pooling like blood. Poirot's heart quickened. The snowbound trap was closing, and the killer was growing bold. The next bell, if it rang, would signal the next act. Hercule Poirot, his mind a steel trap, was ready to spring. Chapter 11. The second victim. The Orient Star remained trapped in the Alpine blizzard, its luxurious carriages a prison of snow and suspicion. Hercule Poirot stood in the dining car, the howl of the wind outside a relentless reminder of their isolation. His collection of clues weighed heavily on his little grey cells, the black leather glove, LB, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief, ED, the threatening letter to Madame Eleanor Duval, the timetable notes, the brass key, the newspaper hinting at Valois' smuggling scandal, the coded timetable, Renard's cryptic note, the torn photograph, the coded letter, the poison-stained knife, the belladonna note, the poison vial, and the Istanbul map with its triangle symbol. The conductor's confession and the waiter Pierre's disappearance had deepened the conspiracy, suggesting a smuggling ring with the crew's complicity. Now, with the train snowbound, Poirot sensed the killer was growing bolder, the trap tightening around them all. The passengers gathered in the dining car were a tableau of unease. Madame Duval's hands trembled as she sipped tea, her eyes darting to Colonel Victor Rostov, who stood rigid, his gaze fixed on the frosted windows. Dr. Elias Moreau clutched his notebook, his spectacles fogged with anxiety. Signora Lucia Bellini, her scarlet shawl askew, murmured to a waiter, her laughter strained. Monsieur Paul Renard, his fedora low, watched the room with a predator's calm. The absence of Pierre, the waiter who had passed Renard's note, hung like a shadow over the group. A piercing scream shattered the tense silence, echoing from the direction of Carriagear. The passengers froze, their faces paling. Poirot sprang to his feet, his cane tapping urgently as he led the way, followed by Monsieur Lefebvre, the conductor, whose pinched face was now a mask of dread. The scream had come from the service area, a narrow corridor lined with storage closets and crew quarters. There, crumpled against a linen cupboard, lay Marie, a young maid who had served in the dining car. Her lifeless body was slumped, a silk scarf knotted tightly around her throat, her eyes wide in frozen terror. Poirot knelt beside her, his gloved hands examining the scene with clinical precision. The scarf, pale blue and finely woven, bore no monogram, but was scented with jasmine, a detail that tugged at his memory. The strangulation was swift, the marks on her neck suggesting a strong, deliberate hand. Her apron pocket was torn, and from it fell a small silver pendant, shaped like a bell, its surface etched with a tiny triangle symbol, the same delta from the coded timetable and Renard's map. Poirot's moustache twitched as he pocketed the pendant, its weight a new thread in the tapestry of murder. "Monsieur Lefebvre," Poirot said, his voice steady but sharp. "When was Marie last seen alive?" Lefebvre stammered. "She served tea an hour ago, monsieur, then went to tidy the crew quarters. I thought she was resting." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this scarf, does it belong to her?" Lefebvre shook his head. "I don't know, monsieur. It's not standard issue." Poirot noted the conductor's trembling hands, recalling his earlier confession about altering the logbook for Duval. The passengers, now crowding the corridor, gasped at the sight. Madame Duval covered her mouth, her diamond earrings catching the dim light. "Another murder?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Colonel Rostov's jaw clenched, his eyes scanning the crowd as if searching for an escape. "Doctor?" Moreau's spectacles slipped, his notebook clutched like a shield. Signora Bellini's hand flew to her throat, her dramatic gasp almost theatrical. Renard remained at the back, his expression unreadable, but his fingers twitched, betraying unease. Poirot addressed the group, his voice cutting through the panic. "Mesdames et messieurs, a second victim confirms the killer is among us, their purpose tied to the bells. This pendant, with its triangle symbol, links Marie's death to Monsieur Valois. Who among you knows its significance?" Silence met him, thick with fear and secrets. Duval's eyes flickered to the floor, Rostov's hands balled into fists, and Moreau's lips twitched. Bellini's gaze lingered on Renard, who met it with a slight nod, too subtle for most, but not for Poirot. He dismissed the passengers, instructing Lefebvre to secure the body and the scene. In his compartment, Poirot spread his clues, adding the bell-shaped pendant to the collection. He noted in his notebook, Marie strangled, jasmine-scented scarf, bell pendant, delta symbol, links to Valois timetable, Renard's map. The pendant was a bridge between the murders, its symbol tying the victims to the smuggling ring. Marie, a maid, was no random target had she overheard something, seen something, or carried a message like Pierre. Poirot recalled the jasmine scent from the dining car, where Bellini's perfume had been potent. Was the scarf hers, or planted to implicate her? The triangle symbol suggested a larger network with Valois and Marie as liabilities or threats. The missing Pierre, who had passed Renard's note, was either a conspirator or another victim waiting to be found. The snowbound train, isolating them all, was the killer's advantage, delaying discovery and escape. Poirot stepped into the corridor, seeking Lefebvre. The conductor was in the service area. His face ashen. "Monsieur, did Marie have enemies among the crew?" Poirot asked. Lefebvre shook his head. She was quiet, diligent, but she was close to Pierre. They spoke often. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Pierre's disappearance, the note about the 6th bell, and now Marie's death suggested a pattern. The killer was silencing those who knew too much. The blizzard raged outside, the train's lights flickering as the storm intensified. Poirot returned to his compartment, his mind racing. The bell pendant linked the murders to the timetable's code, the smuggling scandal, and the passengers' secrets, Duval's blackmail, Rostov's history, Moreau's ciphers, Bellini's guile, Renard's schemes. The killer was targeting specific individuals, and Poirot feared another was marked. He added to his notebook, "Protect Duval, Rostov, or Moreau. Killer's next target, unclear." The snowbound trap was closing, the killer emboldened by the storm's cover. Poirot's task was urgent, to identify the next victim before the next bell or the next body appeared. The Orient Star, a stage of deception, demanded his sharpest deduction to unmask the murderer before the final act. Chapter 12. The bells align. The Orient Star remained locked in the Alpine blizzard, its opulent carriages a claustrophobic stage for murder and deceit. Hercule Poirot stood in his compartment, his little grey cells ablaze as he arranged his clues, the black leather glove, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief, E.D., the threatening letter to Madame Eleanor Duval, the timetable notes, the brass key, the newspaper hinting at Henri Valor's smuggling scandal, the coded timetable, Renard's note, the torn photograph, the coded letter, the poison-stained knife, the belladonna note, the poison vial, the Istanbul map, and the bell-shaped pendant from Marie's body. The murders of Valor and the maid Marie, tied by the triangle symbol and the bells, pointed to a smuggling ring and a killer among the passengers or crew. With the train snowbound, Poirot knew the time had come to confront the suspects and unravel the deadly puzzle. He summoned the passengers to the dining car, where the chandeliers flickered under the storm's strain, casting shadows on the white linen and crystal. Madame Eleanor Duval sat pale, her diamond earrings dull in the dim light. Colonel Victor Rostov stood rigid, his hands clasped behind him. Dr. Elias Moreau clutched his notebook, his spectacles slipping. Signora Lucia Bellini, her scarlet shawl slipping, forced a smile. Monsieur Paul Renard, his fedora removed, watched with a predator's calm. Monsieur Lefebvre, the conductor, hovered at the edge, his pinched face ashen. The absence of Pierre, the missing waiter, loomed large. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice clear and commanding. "Two murders have stained this journey. Henri Valois stabbed at 5:50 and Marie strangled an hour ago. The bells from 5th to 6th mark the killer's plan, and the clues point to one among you." He held up the timetable notes. 5th to 6th, do not delay. 5th bell, act swiftly. These set the stage for Valois' death, linked to a smuggling ring. He produced the coded timetable and map. The triangle symbol, delta, marks a delivery in Istanbul, confirmed by Dr. Moreau's cipher knowledge. Moreau's lips twitched, but Poirot continued, holding up the bell-shaped pendant. "This, found on Marie, ties her death to Valois." The killer silenced her, fearing she knew too much. He turned to the photograph, its torn edge revealing a Parisian café. "Madame Duval, this shows you with a man. Valois, I presume, linked to a debt in his ledger." Duval gasped, her hands trembling. "And the threatening letter, 'Beware the bells,' warned you of exposure." Poirot paced, his cane tapping rhythmically. The glove LB pointed to Signora Bellini, but its placement was too obvious, a distraction. The handkerchief E'd in compartment 12, with blood, implicated Madame Duval, but it was planted. The poison vial and belladonna note suggested a second weapon. but no poison was used. These were red herrings, meant to confuse. He turned to Renard. Your note, keep the schedule. Sixth bell was a warning, and the Istanbul map mark you as the scheme's architect, a smuggling mastermind. Renard's eyes narrowed, but Poirot pressed on. Colonel Rostov, your history with Madame Duval, noted in the ledger VR, and your presence in the corridor contradict your alibi. Dr. Moreau, your ciphers and reluctance to share your notebook betray knowledge of the smuggling code. Monsieur Lefebvre, your altered logbook and possession of the photograph point to complicity. He paused, facing the group. But the true killer is one whose motive burns deeper than greed. Revenge. Madame Duval, you loved Valois years ago, as the photograph shows. He betrayed you, blackmailing you with that secret, demanding 10,000 francs. You paid Lefebvre to hide your connection, but Valois pressed harder. You argued in Paris as Lefebvre overheard. At 5:50 you entered compartment 12, where Valois waited for a smuggling drop. You stabbed him, using the scarf, scented with your jasmine perfume, to strangle Marie later, silencing her knowledge of your movements. Duval's face crumpled, tears streaming. He ruined me, she cried. He threatened to expose my past, my shame. I couldn't let him destroy me again. Poirot nodded gravely. You planted the handkerchief to confuse, but the jasmine scarf betrayed you. The bell pendant, a gift from Valois, was Marie's. She wore it, knowing your secret, and you killed her to keep it buried. Rostov stepped forward, his voice low. I knew of her pain, but I did not kill. Moreau clutched his notebook, silent. Bellini's laugh was gone. Her eyes wide. Renard's calm cracked, his hand twitching toward his pocket. Poirot raised a hand. Monsieur Renard, you orchestrated the smuggling, but Madame Duval acted alone in murder. Your note to Pierre was to ensure the drop, not to kill. Lefebvre, trembling, confessed. I altered the logbook for her money, nothing more. Poirot's gaze softened. You are guilty of greed, not murder. He turned to the group. The bells aligned the crimes. Valois at 5:50, Marie after the sixth bell's silence, sabotage to mask the timeline. The sword. The passengers were silent. The blizzard cells howled. The only sound. Poirot produced the brass key. This unlocked Valois-Sept's trunk, revealing the smuggling plan, but it was Duval-Sept's rage that struck the fatal blow. He faced her. Madame, you will face justice in Istanbul. Duval collapsed, sobbing as Lefebvre summoned the crew to restrain her. Poirot's eyes lingered on Renard, whose role in the smuggling ring remained unresolved. The dining car, a stage of revelation, held its breath as the truth settled. The bells had aligned, and the killer was unmasked, but Poirot sensed a shadow. Renard's scheme was not fully exposed. The train's lights flickered, the storm unrelenting. Poirot added to his notebook. Duval, killer, revenge for blackmail. Renard, smuggling mastermind, uncaught. The second murder was solved, but the smuggling plot lingered, a final thread to unravel before the journey's end. Chapter 13. The Final Bell. The Orient Star emerged from the alpine blizzard, its wheels grinding against the cleared tracks as it resumed its journey toward Istanbul. The dining car, once a stage for whispers and deceit, now held a somber silence, the weight of two murders, Henry Valois and the maid Marie, settled by Hercule Poirot's unmasking of Madame Eleanor Duval as the killer. Yet, as Poirot sat in his compartment, his collection of clues spread before him: the black leather glove, the torn ticket stub, the monogrammed handkerchief, E.D., the threatening letter, the timetable notes, the brass key, the newspaper, the coded timetable, Renard's note, the torn photograph, the coded letter, the poison-stained knife, the belladonna note, the poison vial, the Istanbul map, and the bell-shaped pendant. He knew the tapestry was not complete. Monsieur Paul Renard's smuggling ring, hinted at by the triangle symbol, remained unresolved, and Poirot's little grey cells sensed an accomplice lurking in the shadows. The train's rhythm steadied, the Alps fading into rolling hills as dawn broke, casting a pale light through the frosted windows. Poirot reviewed his notebook. Duval, killer, revenge for Valouet's blackmail. Renard, smuggling, mastermind, uncaught. The conductor, Monsieur Lefebvre, had confessed to altering the logbook for Duval's payment, and the missing waiter, Pierre, had been found hiding in a crew closet, claiming fear for his life after passing Renard's note. But the bell pendant, linking the murders, and the coded timetable suggested a deeper conspiracy. Poirot resolved to confront the passengers one final time, suspecting Renard had not acted alone. In the dining car, the passengers gathered, their faces etched with exhaustion and relief that the killer was caught. Madame Duval, now confined to her compartment under Lefebvre's watch, was absent. Colonel Victor Rostov sat stiffly, his eyes avoiding Poirot's. Elias Moreau clutched his notebook, his spectacles steady for once. Signora Lucia Bellini, her scarlet shawl muted, sipped coffee in silence. Renard, his fedora absent, leaned back, his sharp features betraying a flicker of unease. Lefebvre stood nearby, his pinched face still nervous. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant in the quiet car. "Madame Duval killed Valois for his blackmail, and Marie to silence her knowledge. But the smuggling ring marked by the triangle symbol was not her doing. Monsieur Renard orchestrated it, as his note and map confirm." He held up the bell pendant. "This found on Marie was no mere trinket. It was a signal worn by those in the ring. Marie was a courier, killed when she threatened to expose the plan." Renard's lips curled. "Speculation, Monsieur Poirot. You have no proof." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "None, monsieur. I have more. The coded letter in Madame Duval's trunk addressed to E.D. was not meant for her. It was misdelivered. The true recipient is among us." He turned to Dr. Moreau. "Doctor, your notebook holds the key. Your ciphers, your knowledge of the triangle symbol. You are no mere scholar. You are Renard's accomplice, decoding the timetable for the smuggling drop in Istanbul." Moreau's spectacles slipped, his face paling. "Absurd. I study linguistics." Poirot produced the belladonna note from Moreau's compartment. "This, doctor, names a poison you knew well, yet it was unused, a distraction, like the glove and handkerchief. Your notebook contains the smuggling code." "None." Under Poirot's unrelenting gaze, Moreau broke, his hands shaking as he opened the notebook. Pages of ciphers, matching the timetable's symbols, spilled forth. I only decoded for him," Moreau stammered. "Renard paid me. I didn't kill anyone." Poirot nodded, turning to Renard. "You used Moreau's expertise, Valot's wealth, and Marie's loyalty. But when Valot's demanded a larger share, you planned his death, expecting Duval's rage to take the blame. You silenced the sixth bell to obscure the timeline, and Pierre's note was your warning to keep the crew in line." Renard's calm cracked, his hand reaching for his pocket, but Lefebvre, spurred by guilt, restrained him. "Enough!" Lefebvre cried. "I altered the logbook for Duval, but I knew nothing of smuggling." The passengers gasped, the truth settling like dust. Poirot continued. "The torn photograph showed Valois and Duval, a past Renard exploited to incite her. The brass key unlocked Valois' trunk, revealing the smuggling plan, but Moreau's ciphers were the heart of it." He faced the group. "Justice will be served in Istanbul. Renard and Moreau will answer for their crimes, as will Duval." The train's final bell rang, a clear, resonant chime signaling the approach to Istanbul. The passengers exhaled, the tension breaking like the storm outside. Poirot added to his notebook, "Moreau, accomplice, decoded ciphers. Renard, smuggling leader, all clues resolved." He reflected on the human condition, greed, betrayal, revenge, driving such intricate crimes. The bell pendant, a symbol of the smuggling ring, had led him to the truth, its triangle echoing the coded timetable. As the Orient Star pulled into Istanbul's station, the golden domes of the city gleaming in the morning sun, Poirot watched the passengers disembark. Duval, Renard, and Moreau were taken into custody by local authorities, their faces a mix of defiance and despair. Lefebvre, shaken but relieved, promised to cooperate. Colonel Rostov and Signora Bellini, cleared of murder but tainted by their secrets, slipped into the crowd. Poirot stood on the platform, his cane polished, his mustache impeccable. The Orient Star had been a stage of human folly, its bells marking a tragedy now resolved. He murmured, "The truth, it is like the final bell, clear, inevitable, but heard only by those who listen." With a tip of his hat, he turned toward the city, ready for the next mystery to stir his little grey cells.